So I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker. And I'm happy that we're not too much delayed, because also that he straight has to head after the Q&A session, which will be after this, head to the airport. So please feel free to also still ask him questions, because he'll also be available on Slido for Q&A session. Please welcome Ted Persson, an operating partner at EQT Ventures, one of the latest additions in the European venture funding ecosystem. So he is responsible for the deal side and supports portfolio companies in product development, storytelling, and design. And you have been in tech for more than 20 years. You founded a series of startups, digital agencies, and what I might think is most the coolest thing, a vodka brand. So I'm very much looking forward how to do that, and I hope you have still from your previous startup some samples with you. Okay, thank you very much for coming all the way to Transylvania, and we're looking forward to learning from you.
The most humble way I can with a giant picture of myself. My name is Ted Persson, operating partner at EQT Ventures, and I'm here to talk about product. But first, just a few words on my background. I just realized that the tagline of Techsylvania actually maps perfectly to what I've done over my years working. So I started out with coding, then I moved into product, then funding. And coding, I did on a VIC-20, which was the most boring computer ever. So the only thing you could do was to code. Went into using the Amiga, did some coding there as well. Realized that I was more of a graphics guy. Used this tool called Lux Paint a lot. And then I think in '96, I stumbled into product. So as part of founding this company called Blocket, which is the largest classified service, first in Sweden and then in Europe. Now they're operating in 18 different markets. So this might not be my proudest design, pretty awful actually, but to my defense, this is what it looked like before. So I made it slightly better. And it's also kind of interesting to see how designs stick around. So this is what the Romanian version of Blocket, Tocmai, looked like 3 years ago when it was acquired by Naspers and became OLX. So pretty similar. Since then, I've been doing branded apps, weird robotic installations using AI for Absolute Vodka. Was part of the team exploring how user interfaces for self-driving cars should work for Volvo. Designed what later became Apple Maps for a company called C3 that was acquired by Apple. Was the CEO, short stint, of a company called Cloudo, which was a cloud desktop company. CPO of a loyalty app called Wrap. And then the vodka that I created called Our Vodka. This is the Our Berlin one. You can enjoy it in London, Seattle, Detroit, and now also in New York and a bunch of other cities. So I've been doing a lot of different things. And my latest chapter started 3 years ago when I joined EQT Ventures to help set up a pan-European venture fund of 566 million euros. We have offices in Stockholm, London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Luxembourg, and San Francisco, and I'm based in Stockholm. And EQT Ventures is part of EQT, which is one of the biggest private equity houses in Europe. And so far, we've done 25 or so investments. So that's my background in a nutshell. So code, product, and funding, just like Techsylvania. So for the next 15 minutes and 25 seconds, I will talk about product empathy and how to get going creating a user-centric culture in your startup. And this is aimed towards founders, and specifically engineering founders, so founders with engineering background. So let's get started with talking about what product is. So to me, product is the whole thing. It's what happens in the intersection between design and the user, engineering and the technology, and business and the chase for revenue. So that's product for you. A very smart guy, way smarter than I am, called Marty Kagan, who's kind of like one of the godfathers of product, puts it like this. The role of a product manager is to discover a product that is valuable, usable, and feasible. And what I like the most in this quote is the word discover. Not invent, but rather discover something that is out there. Because it's a more scientific approach. You're like iterating yourself towards the discovery of the perfect product. And just to get an old feud out of the way, because product is in the intersection of all these different disciplines, my take is that no one owns product, or everyone owns product, not just a product manager. With that being said, I have gathered 3 learnings, hopefully, for getting going with product management. And the first one here is about hiring your first product person. So the first question here I think one should ask oneself is, do I really need a product manager, or is it rather a product doer? Do I need someone to make wireframes or make designs to help the engineers, or am I really ready for someone to manage product? In this talk, I assume that you know that you're looking for a product manager. And there the clicker died. No, it didn't. Product manager. And this is kind of scary, especially if you're a founder. Because if you're a founder, hiring a product person is about giving away control and realizing that leading the company is different from leading the product. As my very smart colleague puts it, great founders think about product, but exceptional founders ask the tough questions about who should lead the company versus who should lead the product. Martin is an executive in residence at EQT Ventures and also founded Mind the Product, which is a really big product conference. So the question then is, okay, where do we find this product manager? So since the background can be in any of these disciplines, logically, the person we're looking for could either be a designer, a business developer, or an engineer background. And if you're an engineer, of course it could be that the product is very technical, then it would make sense to have an engineer product manager. But if it's not technical, I would suggest that you look in the designer bucket or in the business developer bucket. I have to click here instead, it seems like. Because diversity grows better teams. And when you have the person, don't evaluate that person using the engineering filters. I think this is a very common mistake. You're an engineer, you're looking for another engineer. But this product manager most likely has a completely different skill set. So go out there and talk to product managers you admire or other people you admire and get help from them in crafting the profile for the person you're looking for. Because if you don't craft the profile you're looking for well, it can end up somewhat like this. You're looking for a person who does not exist, who knows everything from product management to data science to UX to front end to everything. And this we also see a lot. Another important point is to find a person with the right level of experience. Because if you're hiring your first product person, most likely you will have someone, you want someone really, really, really talented and skilled. But if you hire a CPO, for instance, from a big company to a small startup, it might be a mismatch. Because a CPO, the skill set of a CPO is very different from the skill set of a product manager. So building a product versus scaling a product versus leading a large team of product managers are very different skill sets. Or to put it in a picture, I kind of like this one. So my view is that it's good to find someone who don't mind getting their hands dirty, who can do hands-on work, but has a conceptual mindset, meaning that they can grow in their role for the future. One more point here, and that point is specifically for European startups, because we're pretty impressed by big Silicon Valley companies. And we see time after time that you recruit someone from Google or Facebook or Apple, but those companies are very different in terms of culture, and they're also not startups, they're scale-ups. So just because it's a cool logo doesn't mean it will work. That was on hiring your first product person. Moving on to getting off the ground with that person on the team. So usually this is how it starts. You as the founder or lead engineer heads over to the head of product and says, I need wireframes for whatever tomorrow. And I don't think that gives that person a fair chance to really excel. So my recommendation is to have a conversation around the future vision of the product, kind of like a concept car, and consider that a separate track, maybe for the first 3 months. And then gradually give away responsibility, because in the end, it's your startup or your company as a founder. It's kind of like when you buy a new fish for your aquarium. You put the fish in the aquarium, but in a plastic bag for the fish to adjust before letting it out. And then I think it's very important to manage expectations, especially around engineering teams. And if you have like 15 engineers and you hire the first product person, it could be kind of hard for that product person to fit in, because you might have a different background, you might look at the world in a different way. So I think it's important to educate the rest of the team and also avoid the product messiah trap. And with that, I mean this expectation of one person coming into the company and just fixing everything. And of course, the product person should be multi-skill, but not sort of superstitious or unreal. And one way of managing this, I think, is to pair the person up with a product doer. So if you don't already have a UX designer or UI designer, it could be a good idea to recruit both a product manager and a person of a more doer background at the same time. Because then you have someone that the engineers can go to fix that like new icon or whatever, while the product manager is working on the vision or management of the product. So those were a few ideas and thoughts on how to get off the ground. Moving on to how you make it stick, how you turn this into a culture, and specifically a user-centric culture. And the easy way to do this, of course, is to hire more product people. Because just like an aquarium, it's all about the concentration of different roles or different fluids or different fish or whatever. So I think it's important to think about the ratio between your product people, your design people, and your developers. And then for your specific company, that ratio can differ. And it also differs depending on what you're doing right now. So if you're in an explorative state, when you're trying to invent a new product or discover a new product, maybe the ratio is 1 to 1 to 1. So you have one developer per one designer per one product person. But then if you're more in a development phase, maybe this is what it would look like. So there's one product person, one designer, and 7 developers. And this has been debated a lot. This is from a TechCrunch article I found. This is developer-designer ratio. But I think there's a clear trend where product people and design people get more and more involved in the product development process. Another thing I think a lot of companies forget, and when getting a product person in could be a good excuse to start doing, is to meet your users or date your users on a regular basis. And I think this is such an easy thing, but still we forget about it. Bring people into your office, create quick and dirty focus groups, and they're fantastic tools to get to know your customers better, like Look Back, where you can create super simple user studies, Full Story, where you can record every session where users interact with your website, or Hotjar, where you create heat maps for your service. The thing that I figured out, and it took me way too long, is for me it worked to let product and design work one sprint ahead of developers with a slight overlap. So when the developers enter a sprint, the sprint goals, the user journeys, and the wireframes are already kind of done. But while doing so, of course, make sure you involve the engineers in the whole process. So the engineers don't turn into just doers, because then you don't maximize the value of those people. So a good way to look at it could be like this, where the responsibilities end and stop. Another thing that I think is important is finding a process that works for you. And the last few years, all these processes like Agile and Scrum and Lean and so forth have gained a lot of traction, also outside of tech. And many of these processes were invented in industrial settings or in automotive settings, and that's super cool, and I think it can help a lot of companies, even incumbent companies, to transform. But I think it's also important to be open to that everything is not the same. So if you take the automotive example, for centuries, car designers and car product people have had their own methods of doing stuff. So be open to them, explore those, and see what mix works the best. And of course, there could be combinations between these different ways. Don't shoehorn everything into your existing development process. And then a few words on organization. So I've seen pretty much everything, and there's a lot of like trends. And I would say right now, the Spotify squad model is what everyone is talking about. To me, it doesn't really matter what headline you put on it, but I would advise against putting product people, design people, engineer people into separate teams. Because then you start safeguarding and create islands around these different skill sets. And then you start managing and create prioritization around how to manage your prioritization, which is kind of a bit too much. So I'm a big fan of cross-functional teams or feature feature teams. And the Spotify squad model is one example of such a setup. So I've been talking a lot about how product and design and engineering work together. But this, of course, goes for all the skill sets and all the roles in a company. So I think product and marketing, it's both about storytelling. So there's a lot of benefit for these different skill sets to work together as well. And customer support, and data science, and all of the other ones. So those were some thoughts on how to make it stick in a more sustainable fashion. So those were my 3 chapters on hiring your first product person, on how you get off the ground, and then how you make it stick. And a few books that I would recommend to finish off. 3 books that I like a lot. Designing for Emotion is a very thin book. I think it's only 50 pages. I highly recommend that book for everyone. It's about how to embrace empathy and start creating products with the user first. Then, of course, the Sprint book by Jake Knapp of Google Ventures, and then the product leadership book by my colleague Martin Eriksson and 2 of his colleagues. So with that being said, I can now be quiet for 2 minutes and 51 seconds. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if you've seen the morning sessions, but other people who finished early, we made them tell jokes.
Okay.
But I'll not make you do that. So you're like off at a better way, unless you really want to, in which case you're very welcome.
No jokes in store right now, but
okay.
Next time, next year.
Good. Okay. Then thank you very much. Please all remember that you can go to slide.do and ask questions. He'll be going right after this to the Q&A stage, so you can ask him there in case you have further follow-up questions to the presentations.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.